When I got my DNA done with my grandson, that my son wanted me, the Army Navy said, Dad, and it's pretty much what I had vowed with my dad long before the internet in the early 60s. Right there on Platte River that came.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Pastor.
Welcome, everyone. Glad to see you on this dark, foggy night. And this Groundhog Day. I've got good news and I've got bad news. Bad news is we've got 6 more weeks of winter. Yeah.
So what is the good news?
Rick has the good news. I'll let him.
No, the good news is we still have 6 weeks of winter. So guys, seriously, praise the Lord, because if calendar goes, we are going to have a good year season-wise.
Oh, so if we have the 6 months.
There is a reason for the seasons.
There we go. All right, so we'll take a more positive approach. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Rick, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Oh, that's all right. The good news is that the Walker Road property is going to close on Friday.
It'll be.
It's either 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock. So.
Okay.
I'm just gonna go sit outside that lawyer's door until they let us in.
We're waiting. Awesome.
Yeah. Let's begin with a word of prayer. The Lord be with you. Gracious God, we thank you for this evening, this time together, for the opportunity to study your word, the story of the ways that you interact in the lives of your people, the ways that you interact in our lives. We ask that you would pour out your Spirit to lead us and guide us and direct us. Use this time to draw us closer to you and to one another. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I would invite you to say with me the words of the Jesus Creed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. All right. Actions speak louder than words. Have you ever heard this before? Right? So what does it mean?
Watch what they do, not what they say.
Yeah.
Walk the walk.
Walk. There you go. Watch what they do, not what they say. Walk the walk. Don't just talk the talk. So if I tell somebody that I love them and then am mean to them, do you think they'll believe me? And I'd say, can you imagine me being mean to anybody? And everybody on this side of the room is going to go, nope. And everyone over there is going to go, yeah.
It's called parenting.
In which case, I'd say it's a matter of perspective. All right. All right. In our story tonight, we see Israel's actions about their faith and their relationship with God. And unfortunately, it's not good. The things that they say don't always line up with the things that they do. But the good news is that in the midst of it, God is faithful. And because God is faithful, then we can always trust him. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we'll dismiss you wonderful folks. Have a great time together. I have to say, this was probably the hardest chapter to put together because I kept wanting to write wondering
Not wandering.
instead of wandering.
That's different.
It's definitely different, but there's some value in wondering as we spend time pondering and thinking through and what are the implications, and as good Lutherans saying, what does this mean? All of that kind of stuff. So as we consider this chapter, we'll see the wilderness wanderings. We'll see the spies sent to Canaan. We'll see that Aaron, the brother of Moses, dies. We'll see the Israelites in the plains of Moab. And then we will see Moses die. So we've come a long way. We're covering literally a lot of ground in this one. Right, yeah. So a lot of time as well. Before I get into kind of some of my notes and observations, I'm just curious, how was reading this chapter for you?
I did not like it.
Yeah, it felt Reader's Digest-y to me. Condensed,
Yeah, okay. Well, you're doing about 2 books of the Bible in this one. Yeah, yeah. What didn't you like about it?
Well, of course they grumbled about every little thing. And it was like God was kind of like getting very angry with them.
Yeah.
He do things to them that, luckily Moses, being the politician that he was, I guess, was able to dissuade him from doing it most of the time. I mean, it just was kind of hard to read.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the New Testament, and I have a hard time with it.
Yeah, okay. That's
Now, I mean, it's just, I think the Old Testament is hard to read and hard to understand at times.
yeah, absolutely it is.
Thank goodness for Moses. It just
Yeah, but
shows us our need for an intercessor.
But there comes a point where when Moses talks to God, and God is so upset or irritated, or I don't know what word would be, that he goes away. And I go like, oops, wait a minute, where did he go now? Because you always think God is there with you, God is with you. And in this, it says he left. He left because these people are so hard that he said, let's give it a home. And that was a shocker for me. It really was. I don't think there's any other part in the Bible that says that God said no. Give it a time.
Yeah, I struggled with this chapter too. And not because it seemed like it was longer than the other chapters, although I think it was. This was almost 20 pages.
Yeah, it was.
I
Yeah.
thought it had a lot of details, a lot of information in it to grasp.
It did?
From the beginning. It's not. I didn't think it was hard, but it had a lot of information. As I say that you read through so many different situations on those 40 years that they are wandering there. And of course, many things happened.
Yeah. I struggled with all of the punishments. 25,000 people died here. People were slaughtered over there. This and that and the other thing, and it was really hard for me to wrap my brain around that. Right? That was one of the challenges for me.
Miriam got leprosy.
Yeah, and Miriam's leprosy. Yeah.
Yeah, and somebody was told to kill the siblings.
Yeah. Or the when the Moabite women got into the picture and they put the javelin through the one guy and into her too, and
Very vivid. It was.
yeah, but that I would say so the way I kind of wrap my head around this is that this is the way that things happened at this point, right? And the responses that we see from God happening here are in very specific situations in a very specific context. Right? This wasn't God's first choice in how to act. It was kind of his hand was forced, so to speak. Okay? But really the heart of God is ultimately seen in Jesus. The heart of God is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. But that doesn't mean that you can get away with whatever you want and that anything goes. This isn't anarchy.
It creates a stark contrast between law and grace.
It does. It creates it does that. Yep. Very good. And also the ultimate issue at hand here is faith and trusting that God is who God says God is. That's it. So that whole actions speak louder than words. If you really believe that God is this way, that this is who Yahweh is, and that he's going to do this, then you wouldn't worry about where are we going to get food and where are we going to get water, and we can't go in there. There are giants in there. Are you crazy? They'll squash us like grasshoppers. Because that's, and we talked about this a little bit last time, that's important, one, for the witness that it gives. Remember, God sets aside a people for himself, not so that they can be the best people in the whole world, right? These are the favored ones, the favorites. But he sets aside a people for himself so that through the way that they live life and interact with their neighbors, the neighbors would come to know who God is. So if they get that wrong, then their witness falls short, and the nations around them don't know who the Lord is. And if you don't know who the Lord is, you don't have life. Yeah. So you have this going on. This is what's playing out. So when we see these harsh things, and they are harsh, and you can go, yeah, this really makes me uncomfortable, and that's a perfectly legitimate reaction, because it does. I think one, understanding that the nature of the context required it doesn't mean that we have to say that it was good, but we understand. And two, that's not how God typically reacts. That's not the place where he starts from, right? So Luther talked about God's alien work, right? Alien in the sense that it was foreign to him, to his character, to his nature, right? And that alien work is punishment. That's not who God is. That's not his. He's not this angry, grumpy old guy up in the sky waiting to zap us because it brings him joy to do so. It's only when his hands kind of forced. And we see at the end of the chapter, he says, just as a father disciplines his son, so the Lord God was disciplining you. It was all about kind of getting them to that point where they would be ready for that relationship. And if they would have learned that lesson sooner, then they might not have had to experience all those hard things. So it's a you want to be careful walking that line. We don't want to be flippant about the extreme loss of life and tragedy, and yet at the same time, we also want to understand that God isn't that way all the time with everybody, if that makes sense.
Also, I think the Israelites, having lived in Egypt, they were used to a lot of violence because they were subjected to a lot of punishment and violence from the Egyptians. And I think the people around them too. So I think, I don't know if I can express what I'm trying to say, but I think the punishment that God inflicted on them also reflected that, people around you also get punished like this or get, in this kind of situation. People are violent against each other.
Yeah.
And you are violent against God, so this is what you get for it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was able to say what I was trying to say.
No, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I mean that was life in that part of the world at that time.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. One of the things to appreciate about these stories is that they're realistic. And I think it can be easy to read the Bible and to read into the people that the Bible tells us about in a very high level of almost perfection. Like, these were the Bible people. Like, they got, what? Oh, if only I could live in Bible times and see the things that they saw. And wouldn't that be wonderful?
That's not
The
that we
good
are.
old days.
Well, for starters, the cell service back then was just awful. I mean, you wouldn't even want that. But the reality is, it's very real. So we see people failing and falling short and messing up in a really big way, and we get the real raw emotion. So look on page 72. This is Moses, and he's crying out to God, right? Very bottom of the paragraph. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me. If I found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. Right? He's just overwhelmed. Yeah. And the constant grumbling and complaining, and he's a little outnumbered.
But we were talking, it says 600,000 men. So we figure if they are married, that's 12 times
Yeah.
one child more.
Yeah.
1.5 million people plus cattle plus stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's a logistical nightmare, to use a technical theological phrase. Yeah. So what are we going to do with this? How does this happen, right? So then the Lord says, tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow when you will eat meat. The Lord heard you when you wailed, if only we had meat to eat, or we were better off in Egypt. Now that the Lord will give you meat and you will eat it, you will not eat it for just 1 day or 2 days or 5 or 10 or 20 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it.
Tough talk.
Yeah. And imagery too, right? Like, this just gross.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Alright, you want meat? Here you go.
I'll give you meat.
I'll give
But
you
it
meat.
wasn't a variety. It wasn't steak and then pork chop.
Yeah,
and
I
then-
have a question, Pastor.
Yes, ma'am.
What is
Oh,
the
I guess they
homers
wouldn't eat
they are
pork
talking
chops.
about? That measurement?
The omer,
Yeah,
it's a measurement. I don't know what the exact.
we tried the dictionary, we tried the Bible in 3 languages, we cannot figure out how much it is.
It sounds like it's a hoarding though. Were they
like
hoarding?
2 feet or, I don't know.
Where is the?
It's in the
73.
more or less in the middle.
And they spread them all
And
out around the camp,
homers.
but while the meat was still between the two. Okay, yeah.
Second paragraph,
It's
Yeah,
and,
second line.
third paragraph, on 73, the 5th line.
It's 2 cubits deep, and then everybody was allowed
10
to
homers.
gather 10 homers.
And we were just wondering,
We Googled it, we couldn't figure out what it was.
Really?
And
Okay,
I
so when we're going into our discussion time, I'll look it up because I know I know I have it somewhere. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head. I want to say it's going to be like about a bowl, like a serving, like a bowl full of what that would be. But
Because quail is very small. It's really-
It's a tenth of an effa.
oh
Yeah.
yes, perfect. Yeah. That's what I was thinking, but I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Yeah.
So it's just a bit.
It sounds
I'll
like it's
show
a very
you that
small
thought.
portion to me.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I can do cubits all day, but that one not so much. Okay. So staying on page 73, you almost have this. You almost get this picture of this soap opera going on, right? And there's nothing else to do out there, right? So what are they going to do? They're going to grumble and complain. Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite.
Well, he came with her,
And,
didn't he?
and Pastor, how long have they been walking around when they started grumbling about his wife? 3 months?
The way this is set up, it doesn't give us the timeline of it, right?
Because he was married when he went with the Pharaoh.
That's right. Yeah, he was already.
Aaron and Miriam knew she was a Cushite.
Yeah.
And now she's not good enough.
Yeah, but you see those instances where people are upset about something and they don't say anything right away, and then the whole thing blows up, and and by the way, yeah, right?
Had the nerve. Very.
Okay.
When you asked me, I would have told you so.
But I mean, you can imagine the tension that's taking place in this, and yet it is mind-blowing to think that in the midst of this camp where there's all this bickering and arguing, I mean, these are the people who walked across the Red Sea on dry ground. Okay, they've seen the Lord work in amazing ways. There's no evidence for this, but this is kind of one of the ways that I see this in my head as I imagine it, as I wonder about it. The way that the sea was split was with the wind, right? That strong east wind. So it's windy, and you can almost imagine them feeling just a spray of mist on their cheeks as they're walking through this, right? Like, this is not something you would easily forget, and yet here they are, right?
Where they crossed at the Sea of Reeds, I had thought I read that the real miracle of this is it wasn't real deep to begin with, but they still were able, and however, a couple of feet or whatever it was, still able to completely wipe out the Egyptian army.
Yeah. I mean, there's always debate about where the location was, right, and how this all played out. But yeah, at the end of the day, more important than where is what. So they passed through, took out the Egyptians, and they were completely free and restored on the other side, untouched.
No matter how deep it was, I mean, it was dry ground.
It's dry ground.
Mucky stuff there.
Yeah. I mean, even now, after the snowfall, there's very little dry ground out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's muddy and nasty, but they were walking on dry ground. Okay. So eventually they make their way to, it's time to enter into the promised land, and they send in spies. Okay. And those spies are scouting things out for how long? 40 days. Why is that significant?
Same thing, it repeats itself on the mountain.
Yep.
And 40 days for Jesus Christ, 40 days.
Yeah. Yep. So, and I think I mentioned this last week. Remember that when we get to Jesus and we see Jesus right after his baptism, he's driven into the wilderness. Okay. And there he encounters Satan. And what's the first temptation? Because he's hungry.
Yeah. Turn these stones into bread.
Turn the stones into bread. Now think about this. This is Jesus. Okay. The language that Satan uses, if is a correct translation, but it's missing something. Okay. What Satan, when we say if in English, that means that it's in doubt, right? So if you are the Son of God, prove it and turn these stones into bread. But what Satan is saying there is, since you are the Son of God,
Yeah.
or because you are the Son of God. So Jesus doesn't have anything to prove here, but Satan's really, really getting at him. But here's the thing. Jesus, as God in the flesh, doesn't need rocks to bring bread into existence. He could say, let there be bread.
Let there be bread.
He could say, let there be pizza. Right? Everybody would go, what's pizza? And she's, oh, it's great. You're going to love it. Right? But he doesn't even need that. So in the wilderness, though, how does Jesus respond to that temptation?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you remember reading that in here?
Yes.
Okay. So not only is Matthew showing that, but he's making all kinds of connections to this particular story, because what Jesus is doing is he's kind of going back and doing a redo, and where the Israelites messed up and they failed and they fell short, Jesus got it right.
As you alluded to on Sunday, Jesus' dialogue with Lucifer right here, he doesn't endure a conversation. His offensive weapon is Scripture.
Yeah.
In all cases.
Absolutely.
And that's the only offensive weapon we have. Everything else is defensive.
Well, it's the only one we need.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. It's the only one we need. Okay. So they get there. The spies do their thing, and their report back is, yeah,
Fabulous.
yeah, they're giants in there.
Yeah, but see the cluster of grapes?
Oh, yeah, the
I
land is
like
great,
that.
but the
Yeah.
people are big.
Oh, could it be black grapes? Please, give me one. Just give me one. Can you imagine? I can understand why they talked about giants. If the grapes are that big that two guys need to carry one, the others must be, I don't know.
How about the size of the other fruits that they brought?
Pomegranate.
Yes.
And, what was the-
Probably, you know.
Yeah, and think about when the only thing you've had to eat is quail and manna, right? Now, I mean, you can do a lot with manna. You have manna pie and manna stew and manna sandwiches and manicotti. Yeah.
Excellent, manicotti, very good.
Manaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
It's the original man witch. There's lots you can do, but how enticing would fruits and vegetables be? And
But also, speaking of manna, there's a part here in this reading where it says that they ground the manna. It was like coriander seeds.
Yeah.
I had never heard that.
Olive oil.
yeah.
I had never before paid attention to that.
Yeah. Isn't it fun, the details you pick up when you go back and look at
So
it?
they would gather it from the ground, but they would not eat it the way it was. They had to prepare it.
Yeah.
And I thought it was ready. It was like
Well, I think they could have eaten it as it was on the ground, but they probably did the preparing to make it taste better, because after a while it would be.
I thought it tasted like French fries. Did I eat that somewhere? Or did I?
Yeah.
Olive oil.
Yeah. Well,
See, like, take me for example. Like, I love the idea of thinking that I could eat French fries for every meal, but eventually I would get sick of that. Maybe. I don't know. French fries are pretty good, but given enough time, it
I
becomes.
guess,
Yeah.
Yep.
And Pastor, I have another question. How do they prepare that quilt? Do you have any idea? Anything written anywhere?
They deep fried it.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Like KFC.
Yeah, right.
It was KFQ.
But they only had coriander seeds.
So,
Is there anything written?
well, they probably would have. No, there isn't.
Roasted it.
But if you think about what they had available to it, they would have roasted it, or they could have boiled it, or like
I
a.
was thinking desert, no wood. So how can you bake it or roast it? That's what I was thinking.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If there was anything written that would tell you how they prepared it.
Then they would
They
have.
put it in sticks and put
Put
it
it
in the
in the
fire
sunshine.
pillar by night.
No,
They were roasting it.
that is work. You roast it. Oh, God.
Well, it was the desert. Isn't it hot during the day? You just sat
Oh,
out
you know
in the
what?
sun.
No. When we went to Israel,
Yeah, they have the
There-
fuel
there are these
rocks.
types of rocks,
They're kind of like a coal when you break them open.
and on the outside they're like white. You wouldn't necessarily think anything of it, but when you break it open, it looks like coal.
yeah, it's a type of fuel.
And they're able to burn those and use those to make fires.
Yes.
Oh, see,
Yeah,
so
we were
they
shown that,
probably
yeah.
roasted it.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Got it.
See, God was providing that.
That-
Yeah.
Even that.
Mhm.
Yours was very funny.
Okay,
I'll
sorry.
bring the food.
Okay. But see, no, but this is that whole wondering thing, right? We're taking some of these details and we're wrestling with them, and what do we do, and how does this work, and how does this play out? Because it brings the story to life in a way that we might not have experienced before. And ultimately, then, in this, we're experiencing God's presence and grace and mercy and love and provision and all that good stuff. All right, so notice on the bottom of page 75, in the last paragraph, but the men who had gone up with him said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And that is absolutely correct. But that is not the point.
Who's stronger than them?
Yes. Okay. So they are absolutely perfectly correct. This is impossible for them. But what they miss is that it's not about them. Yeah. So you go to page 76, and to hear this must have just absolutely broken God's heart. If only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is Yahweh bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, "We should choose a leader and go back."
That is absolutely
Back
Into
to being a
slavery.
slave, yeah.
Ah. But how often do we do that with sin, right? Or, how easy is it for us to choose what we know, what we're most comfortable with? How easy for us is it to, instead of living in the grace of God's love and mercy, to go back to shame and guilt? Mindy's giving me the raised eyebrow, which says, I hope you're listening to yourself right now.
I'm supposed to say that out loud.
Just letting you know that I get it. Yeah, I mean, I struggle with this too. I'm not up here as the expert, but this is kind of an aha that is for me as well, right? And ultimately, what we see then here is faithlessness. It is a lack of trust in God. Okay. So, bottom of that page, Moses goes to the Lord. If you put all these people to death, leaving none alive, the nations who have heard this report about you will say, the Yahweh was not able to bring these people into the land he promised them on oath, so he slaughtered them in the wilderness. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. So Moses returns back to God's mercy, to God's forgiveness, to God's grace. He turns back to God's mission, right? It's not that God is petty or arrogant.
Or has forgotten.
Yeah, and it's not that he cares what other people think, which you might conclude, well, what are the nations going to say when blah, 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 blah. But what Moses is saying here is your mission. What about the mission? Okay. So Moses appeals to God's character, to who God is, to God's heart for this. Okay.
So it's fair to say that they developed a relationship. It took time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It did. But Moses has come a long way from the days of the burning bush when he's like, send somebody else. I'm not good with words.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Now he's actually employing. Now he's actually interacting and going,
Yeah.
oh, come on, boss. Let's work this out.
And his faith is there.
He now has faith, even when people may not.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so the penalty for refusing to go in is that they have to wander for 40 years. 1 year for every day that they were scouting out the land. And then we get to 79. People are grumbling. They're complaining. In fact, they're gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. Okay. So the Lord says, "Go speak to the rock, and it will bring forth water." That's the key here. Speak. So Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock. Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebels. Must we bring you water out of this rock?" Then Moses raised his arm, struck the rock twice with his staff, and water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses, "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land that I give them."
Wow.
Ouch.
Tumultuous.
But I think Moses was fed up with these people at that point. He couldn't take them anymore.
Absolutely he
He
was.
like, so upset that he couldn't even speak to the rock. He was like, he needed to do something.
Well, and you almost feel that for him, don't you?
Yeah.
Like, come on, people. Like, good grief. They just keep complaining and grumbling and...
Did he get in trouble for striking the rock?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the question?
He he got in trouble for striking.
Well, was that him striking the rock instead of speaking?
Like,
Yeah.
out of
Was that
frustration.
like taking the glory for it from himself, taking it away from God?
Yeah, well, because that's exactly what it was. Because look at what he says. Must we bring you water out of this rock?
But also, Pastor, God told him to take the staff. Take the staff and go talk to the rock. So you question yourself, why would God tell him take the staff?
To help him get to
What
the
is
rock.
it? No,
But not to beat
like
the rock
a
with.
symbol of authority.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it
Well,
was.
he used the staff to part the Red Sea.
That's right.
Yes.
Mhm.
And he used it throughout the plagues. Remember, and then he threw his staff down, and it turned into a serpent, and it ate the.
He did things with the staff many times,
Uh-huh.
so.
I guess, like you said, he was so like, I can't take it anymore. Boom.
Boom. Yep.
Sounds like me.
100% better.
Sounds just. I would hit 3 times.
So this really isn't the case, but you can understand why they're called the children of Israel,
Right.
and not the adults of Israel, right? Because they sound like a bunch of teenagers. But this is another one of those things that's hard to wrap your head around. That it might not seem as significant to us, but then maybe that's part of our problem, right? But again, the issue isn't that he hit the rock. It really comes back down to that faithlessness. It's about more than what it seems to be about.
And the consequences for Moses, to me, are absolutely heartbreaking. You
Yeah.
can't- It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But God was good. He said, I'm going
He
to
Show you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did.
He could have said, look,
Yeah.
you boo-boo there, not going to get it. When you get there, you come to me, you're not going to see anything. He
Mhm.
said, I'll show you.
Yes. that
Now,
was-
I wondered as I was reading this. I didn't look this up, so I have no basis for this other than I'm wondering. The description of what he saw, because it said like he saw the Mediterranean Sea and he saw this and that and he saw
Never
the
seen
other.
that.
From that
Now,
locale where he was, I don't think you could see all that.
right.
So I wondered if he showed him those things in almost like a spiritual
In a vision.
vision kind of a thing, right? Not unlike when Satan took Jesus up on a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of the world, kind of a thing, right? That was a detail that I hadn't noticed before, but I wondered.
The first virtual tour.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Everything he showed him.
Mhm.
It was far, one place from the other. You
Yeah.
could not see that
Yeah.
from a map.
Okay, flip to page 80. This is the familiar story. People are grumbling again. God sends venomous snakes among them. Lord says to Moses, make a snake, put it up on a pole. Anyone who is bitten can look at it and live. So Moses made a bronze snake and put it up on a pole. Then anyone who was bitten by a snake looked at the bronze snake and they lived. So make a connection for me here.
Christ on the cross.
Yeah. John chapter 3, Jesus says, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that all who believe in him would have everlasting life. And Jesus was lifted up literally on the cross. So that's the first fulfillment of that. He was lifted up out of the grave in the resurrection, and he was lifted up to heaven in the ascension.
Unrelated point, and maybe Vera can answer this. being the nurse, the nurse that you are. I'm pretty sure most medical emblems, but certainly in the Air Force, the core device is a snake.
Yeah.
So the symbology of that is, I mean, you were a chaplain, but my kid's mother was an Air Force nurse, and she always had it, and there were snakes. And that seems to be a universal medical symbol.
Yes.
See,
Yeah.
see, I've heard that it's come from this, and I've also heard that it's come from an ancient Egyptian or source. Yeah. So I'm not sure which is which for that particular one.
I think both of them go hand in hand because the Egyptians, Israel was there. I mean, and snakes, God good grief, they are everywhere.
Ugh.
You know, there's nothing worse than a snake, actually.
Crickets.
Scorpions and tarantulas.
All right, go to.
Pastor, just one thing with the snake here. I wonder, the snakes came, they bit people died. What is the time frame from when Moses went to God and said, listen, there are many people dying from the snake bites, and then God says to him, put the snake on a pole, until he did that, until he got all the copper, right? No bronze, or the bronze to make the snake.
Mhm.
And it was not like today it happened, and tomorrow they already had it on the pole. Right?
We don't know. Yeah, it doesn't give us the time frame.
Right, but there has to be a time frame here.
Well, absolutely, there is, and I would wondering. I would imagine that it probably took place over the course of several days.
Or a week or so at least.
Build stuff and form it into
It just goes to cement the faith that would have to happen when they have been experiencing all this, and now they can look at this thing on the pole and be healed. And before that, they couldn't.
Well, and
Right, but it's still during the time that it was not there. People were dying from the
Which
snake bites.
emphasizes to the
Right.
people who are remaining
Right,
that God is saving them.
yeah.
right,
Well, and even after the pole was built, they were still getting bit.
right,
The difference was now you look up,
right.
right? And think about the logistics of this.
That's
Have you ever been in the back of the church and somebody up front said something and you went, "Huh? What was that? What'd they say? I couldn't hear them." And that's just a short distance. So imagine being in a crowd of this size. It would take a little bit of time for word to get out. Right? But again, so the logistics of this is just fascinating.
It is.
Absolutely fascinating. Look at verse. Look at page 83. This is the second full paragraph from the bottom. Moses said to the Lord, "May the Lord, the God who gives breath to all living things, appoint someone over this community to go out and come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in, so the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd." Okay. What image does that bring to mind?
Christ again.
Yeah. Jesus is trying to get away for a break. He just learned that John the Baptist was beheaded. The crowds follow him anyway. He sees them and has compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Well, that just, yeah, it does. I mean, that's awesome, right? Page 85. Well, actually, go 84. This is the last full paragraph. Ask now about the former days, long before your time, from the day God created human beings on the earth. Ask from one end of the heavens to the other. Has anything so great as this ever happened, or has anything like it ever been heard of? Has any other people heard the voice of God speaking out of fire as you have and lived? Has any God ever tried to take for himself one nation out of another nation by testings, by signs and wonders, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, or by great and awesome deeds, like all the things that the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? You were shown these things so that you might know that the Lord is God. Besides him, there is no other. So the implied answer in those questions is no. Right? Has this ever happened before? No. Nothing like this. And the Exodus in Old Testament theology is the premier salvation event. It is God saving his people. Okay? It is a big deal. It is such a big deal that the New Testament counterpart to that is the death and resurrection of Jesus. So in the Exodus, God saves his people from slavery to the Egyptians. In the death and resurrection of Christ, God saves his people from slavery to sin and death and evil. So this is powerful stuff. Page 85. Second full paragraph. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. This is what's known as the Shema. Right? And it's called the Shema because that's the first word in Hebrew. Hear is what it means.
Is the center candle of a menorah called the Shema, and it lights all the others?
I don't know.
I think it is. Just
It sounds like it might be right, but
yeah.
I don't know for
Just
sure.
the true thing.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. And then notice, be careful to follow every command. Remember how the Lord your God led you all these ways. Man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. And as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. Right? So those are very much relationship kinds of words. Remember this so that you don't forget it, because if you forget it, then you might go after other gods. Yep. 87. Bottom of page 86. Now, what I'm commanding you today is not too difficult for you or beyond your reach. It is not up in heaven, so that you have to ask, who will ascend into heaven to get it and proclaim it to us so we may obey it? Nor is it beyond the sea, so that you have to ask, who will cross the sea to get it and proclaim it to us so we may obey? No, the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so you may obey it. And does any of that sound familiar? Paul quotes this in Romans chapter 10. Verses 5 through 8. And this is that section where Paul's talking about the power of the word, and how are they going to believe unless they hear, and how are they going to hear unless someone is sent to proclaim. Yeah. 87. This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you that I've set before you life and death, blessings and curses. So when there was a covenant in the ancient world, there were always witnesses to those covenants. And so when you have a covenant between God and God's people, the witnesses are the creation, the heavens and the earth. All right. 88, bottom of the page. Moses was 120 years old when he died. Yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. Hey, that's an idiom. It means he was still fertile. Because evidently back then that was a big deal. Right? Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. All right. So who was with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration?
Moses and Elijah.
Moses and Elijah. And they knew it was them because they had those AAL name tag stickers. Oh, hello, I am.
And Pastor, it doesn't say anything about where Aaron was buried. Moses got buried, and nobody knows where he was buried. How about Aaron? Because he went up the mountain.
No, it tells you the name of the mountain where Aaron was buried.
No, he died on the mountain. Or he died on the mountain, but doesn't say that he was buried there.
I think it's implied.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I would take that to mean that was also the burying would have been part of that.
Yeah, because it says specifically about Moses that God buried him and nobody knows where.
Where?
he is.
Yeah. Yep.
I always found it interesting and fascinating because he took so much care, to protect Moses, so nobody would know, and also nobody would take Moses to be a saint and go there and say something.
Well, that you run that risk, right? And in fact,
Because he was a fantastic person. My goodness.
this reference to the bronze snake is not the last reference in Scripture that we have to the bronze snake. By the time we get into, it's either Kings or Chronicles, that serpent was set up and people were worshiping it, because that's what people do. All right, let's. Normally, I would have you go through. We've done this class in two different formats. We've done a couple where I've kind of talked you through it and pointed out things and highlighted things, and we've also done it where I've had you discuss these questions at your tables, and then we come back and we discuss them as a group. I don't know that we have time to do both well. Do you have a preference for one style over the other?
Oh, I like it when you give us the answers.
Easy way out.
We work through the answers together.
All right. Very politically correct. That was.
I like it
Like
that way.
that you point out certain things, you emphasize certain parts of it that we've read, clarify.
I really enjoy doing that too, and then helping you make connections to different parts of the story or the New Testament, and specifically to Jesus. But I also don't want to deny you the opportunity for conversation and discussion and things like that.
Well, we'll
All right.
I think there's been lots of discussion.
You've been there.
So let me leave you with this. In Jericho is the site, according to tradition, where Jesus was tempted by Satan, and that's a little mountain, and it's called the Mount of Temptation. Okay. There is a store that sells lotions and salts from the Dead Sea, and it's called ahava, which is the Hebrew word for love. Okay.
It's the same as that brand you see in the stores and stuff.
Ahava.
Into the factory.
Ahava. Ahava. Okay. So then at the in Jericho there's a little mall, and there's an ahava store in that mall, and right out the front doors you look up and you see the Mount of Temptation. There's a monastery up there actually, which that must be a wild place to to hang out. And the name of the Ahava store is Temptation. So it says Ahava Temptation. And so I said, help me, please, because I have a temptation.
No.
And lucky for you, you can sign up for this trip and have a whole week of stuff like that.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I just can't.
I have a picture of it, but it says the T is cut off, so it says impatient.
Impatient.
Impatient. Yeah. I have a.
Impatient. All right. Next week, we'll be in chapter 7, and we'll get into this. This is going to be a buckle your seatbelts kind of week as well. Let's close by praying together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you much, everyone. We'll see you next time.